After announcing earlier this week that the United States was no longer going to be sending 155mm artillery shells and air defense interceptor missiles to Ukraine, now all of a sudden it's appearing that that might be reversed, that President Trump may be going back on some of the comments made by some of the senior administration officials and spokespeople, and is going to be sending some air defense interceptors to Ukraine after all, or at least he's going to be discussing it. And man, is that something that is certainly needed on the Ukraine side, is these incredible images you're seeing here, extraordinary, are from Kyiv, Ukraine, because overnight there was yet another Russian attack, aerial attack into Ukraine. This time it is in a very important operational area not far from Kharkiv. I'll be showing that to you on the map here shortly. But this just shows that there is virtually nothing that is stopping the Russian onslaught. Even in areas where Ukraine has air defense, they just don't have enough. And so even Russian drones, which is a category that the Patriot system is designed to hit and can pretty much hit a very sizable portion of it, but Russia keeps having more than the Ukraine side has in air defense missiles. And as long as that's the case, not just the Kinzhal missiles or the KH-101s, but even just some of the regular drones, the improved drones that the Russians have that they built up from what they got from Iran a couple of years ago. Now then these missiles are sending. You're seeing this is a major fire here that's going on, and that's just one of many. That's not at all unlike the one we showed you yesterday from the previous night in Kyiv, where there was all kinds of destruction that was going on in that war. Yeah, that's the ones right here. So you see, this is in back-to-back nights. And listen, I mean, let's just be frank here. A few more air defense missiles are not going to stop any of this stuff. It's not going to change the course of the war. It's not going to prevent Russia from doing this, because they just have too many aerial objects, whether drones or missiles, to be able to saturate anything the Ukraine can decide to do. And the fact is, we just don't have them. We don't have enough at scale that what would be necessary to actually have a huge impact on this war. I mean, you'd have to literally saturate Ukraine with these to have a meaningful reduction. And that's still all you're going to get is a reduction. So if anybody thinks this is going to have any kind of possibility to change the course of the war, I'm afraid they're going to be sadly mistaken. And in terms of ending the war, there's been some developments and some more information regarding the twin phone calls Trump had, first of all, with Vladimir Putin on, I believe it was the 3rd of July, and then with Zelensky on the 4th of July. We talked a little bit about both of those yesterday. There's been additional information, some of which from Trump himself on Air Force One yesterday, after a day of celebrating July 4th activities in the United States. He was asked a number of questions about the Ukraine-Russia war.
No, I don't think he is. I think he's worried about sanctions. I do think he's very worried about sanctions. And, we're determining that the Senate, as you know, has put in big sanctions, very big sanctions.
You want to see Patriot missiles go into Ukraine?
Well, they need them for defense. I mean, I don't want to see people killed, and they're going to need them for defense. They're amazingly effective. We knocked out 14 out of 14. That's pretty amazing. If you think of it, it's almost incredible. But we knocked out 14 out of 14, so they're going to need something because they're being hit pretty hard.
Are you going to send them, though? Are you going to send more?
Yeah, we might. We're looking at it.
So a couple of things that he mentioned there. We'll start off with this issue of the sanctions that he mentioned there. He said the U.S. Senate, that's the one that's being pushed by Lindsey Graham, who's promising to have this huge sanction package along a bipartisan issue that's going to cripple the Russian economy, et cetera. And I mean, we have to keep talking about it because they keep bringing it up, but Russia has made itself sanctions proof. You can still cause some discomfort and some pain, but it's annoyance at most. That's the best that we can get done right now, because Russia, because of these years of sanctions, and I think it's literally in the thousands of different sanctions we have on Russia, they have learned how to live without it. And Russia has these big, its own natural resources. It's got all of the things it needs to be able to self-contain, even if it had nothing else. But as we showed you with Patrick Bob, the German reporter that was on just a couple of days ago, who attended an economic forum in St. Petersburg recently, he said they're not isolated. There was 20,000 participants in this thing from all over the all over the world. And he said, if anybody thinks that a sanction from the West is going to cripple Russia, he said they're not paying attention. So when you still have the president of the United States, when you still have U.S. senators talking a lot of smack, like they think that this is a scary tool that they can wield and it's going to cause the Russian president to pause or to redirect or change his mind about something, again, you're just deluding yourself. That's not going to have any effect any more than sending a handful of more interceptor missiles. We're going to have to start dealing with the core crux issues of this war and peace issue. And this is ultimately an attritional warfare that's being waged by the Russian Federation against everybody that's supporting the Ukraine side. Certainly not just against those two. Russia gets help from Iran and from North Korea, and Ukraine from the entirety of the Western world, and even some beyond that too. And it's an attritional war. And of course, Ukraine is one that's paying the attritional cost in blood, in treasure, and in territory. And that's going to continue on. And as long as we won't deal with those fundamental truths, then the war is going to continue being attrition, and the Ukraine side is going to continue to be ground down in every single category. One of the other things that President Trump talked about there was that he said, yeah, there's more Patriots that are needed for defense. Now, of course, we just mentioned that earlier in the week, we said that's it. We're not going to be sending anymore. And then comes this phone call. And Trump talks about how good they are. And I'm not sure what he meant about that whole 14 out of 14 thing. He didn't put it in any context. I don't know if he was talking somewhere that the Patriot systems in Ukraine shot down 14 out of 14 targets. If he was talking something in Israel, I don't know. He didn't say. Not sure how relevant that is, because you can shoot down some of the slower drones. That's a fact. There's no question about that. But you better have thousands of Patriots per day. I mean, just consider in 2 days and a 3-day span, Russia fired over 1,000 drones and missiles into Ukraine in 2 days over a 3-day time period, just this past week. So as you may know from many of the guests we've had on here, you have to very often shoot 1 or 2 Patriot missiles per target that's coming in. So you're going to have 1,000, probably closer to 1,500, just to be able to have a shot at intercepting all of those targets over 2 days. No one's even talking about that kind of process. And I think that the production capacity in the United States on interceptor missiles is currently up now about 100 higher than it was when the war started in 2022. Now it's around 600 per month. So you can see that would have lasted a day and a half. If 100% of everything that we produced in that particular month was going on there, and you're talking 2 days, and that still wouldn't have been enough. That gives you a scale of the problem. And of course, these things are also going on all throughout the country. The previous one was in the city of Kyiv, and the one yesterday was in the city just outside of Kharkiv, which plays an important role elsewhere too. And so now then we have Trump saying, yeah, we may send some more. And so the question is going to be, what is his intent? Because you see, even when he answered that question, his heart wasn't in it. He wasn't saying, yes, we're going to do this and it's going to make a difference. He's just talking about some things that he might can do. We might send some Patriots. We might do some sanctions. He didn't even commit to either of those things. We're talking about it, as he said at the end of there. And just like in the soundbite we showed you from yesterday, it again is kind of sounded like he's trying to offload this onto Biden.
Ukraine situation, that's a Biden deal. It's not a Trump deal. I'm trying to get it finished off, settled, and we'll see. I don't know. I can't tell you whether or not that's going to happen.
Is it a priority?
Yeah, I'd like to see it happen. I don't want to see 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 soldiers killed every week. And you have other people, but for the most part, so far it's been mostly soldiers. And they're Ukrainian soldiers, and they're also Russian soldiers. But it's 5,000 souls. And they're being killed every single week. So it's really higher than that now.
So he keeps on talking about the casualties and how that is anguishing to him, and he doesn't want to see all those people dying on either side of the line. He keeps again going back again to this whole issue. This is Biden's war. And he keeps saying a lot. That's not just on this one sound clip. Almost every time the subject is brought up in the recent days, that topic keeps coming up, which could imply that he is considering, hey, I'm going to walk away from this finally, even though he had talked about that in April and then sort of walked away from walking away, as the phrase went. Maybe he's going to go back to that, because Trump is a pragmatic person. He's a transactional president, as we know, in virtually every category. And if he sees something he can't win, he's not just going to keep, wasting more resources in something, whether it's political resources or financial resources or military resources, as with our very limited number of interceptor missiles, if he thinks that it can't possibly succeed. And I mean, what sense would it make to continue to be given all this ammunition, weapons, and political capital on something that you can see is going to lose, and then you're going to lose the capital and you're going to lose the conflict on the ground? I think that he may again be reverting back to that situation where we're going to have to find it into this, ugly or otherwise, and we'll see how that's going to go on. Now, there is some additional information that I got just this morning from some Ukraine sources. We're going to see that in just a second. First of all, Trump also, that first soundbite there was from President Trump talking about his phone call with Putin. This one, he is again talking about his call with Zelensky.
Yeah, we had a good call. We talked about different things, and we had a very good call. I think a very, very strategic call.
Are there plans to partner with Ukraine on munitions?
Well, we've been helping them, and we'll continue to help them. It's a pretty tough situation. We'll see what happens. I told you I was very unhappy with my call with President Putin, and it just seems like he wants to go all the way and just keep killing people. No good. It's not good. I wasn't happy with it.
So again, he's like, he wasn't happy with it, but if it's an answer you don't like, you don't have to be happy with it. But that also doesn't mean you can do something about it. If you don't have the leverage and the other side does, and even with everything you could bring to the table, i.e. sanctions, more military support, the other side can still outgun you. You don't have to be happy about it, but you may have to concede to the reality. And interesting, I thought it was an interesting selection of word that President Trump used in that call with Zelensky. He said, we had a very strategic call. Okay, so we know from the readouts, because we showed you yesterday, shortly after that meeting, that Zelensky himself said, yes, we talked about the need for air interceptor missiles. We're going to have an exchange of personnel. Trump also said we may send some people over there. That was yesterday. And then now this one here, he says, yeah, we may send them some help with some interceptor missiles. And we thought that was a little puzzling, because why would you talk about sending missiles, air defense interceptor missiles, after you had just said earlier that because of for some of our personnel in the Pentagon and in diplomatic corps, we don't have enough of them to be able to sustain us, and we can't keep giving away to everybody else if it's going to cause us to go down. Why would you then, just days later, just because somebody made a phone call, talk about sending them more of those very categories of weapons? Nothing has changed in terms of our inventory. Nothing has changed in terms of the need to have America first, as Sean Parnell so emphatically talked about, unless maybe there was more to the story. Now, this is, again, I had this from a single source, so I can't vouch to the veracity of it right now, but given what has been said and what we can see, it is plausible. So we're going to continue to watch this. And that is that the claim is that during this phone call that President Trump conveyed a ultimatum to Zelensky that he got from Vladimir Putin. And apparently Putin gave him these terms. He said, look, just give him these terms here, that this is what we want to have happen. The war has to come to an end. And either we're going to continue to fight until we win everything, or so goes the story, is that we might allow a negotiated end if these certain things are happening. And one of which is that Zelensky has to end martial law and hold presidential elections. Now, we don't have to wait long to find out if this part's true, because in just 10 days from now, the current the martial law decree will run out. And the way it works in the Ukrainian law, and it has since 2022, I forget the exact duration of it, 6 months, 4 months, 3 months, I can't remember, whatever the duration, it's relatively short. Every time it comes up, it has to be renewed, meaning they can't just say we're on martial law indefinitely and we'll get back to you later. They actually have to renew it every time. And so far, of course, they have. But because of the way the Constitution is written, they can't have presidential elections so long as martial law is in effect. And there's a whole host of things that goes along with that from the Ukraine side. that not having martial law would change a lot of the wartime rules that they have and things they can do in terms of forced mobilization, etc. But the Russians are saying you're going to have to end martial law and hold elections, according to this description here. We'll find out if that's the way it is. And apparently, Trump's deal, apparently also with Putin, is that if he agrees to that and agrees to hold elections, then I'm going to give him more air defense missiles until that time to limit the amount of damage. That's what is being reported is part of the deal, and why Trump would be giving him some of these interceptor missiles as long as he does this other part here. Otherwise, and that's why Trump didn't commit to doing it, only that we're going to talk about it, because I'm sure that in a phone call, Zelensky certainly is going to agree to a ceasefire, or isn't going to agree to end the martial law and agree to have elections, because that's what people have been trying to get him to do for years, and he's been unwilling every other time. What we don't know yet is it finally starting to dawn on Zelensky that even in his delusional state and his unwillingness to acknowledge reality, that it's imposing itself on him anyway. I mean, just in these last couple of shows that we put on for you here, the one that Gary showed you at the top of this show with all these destruction around the Kharkiv, and then the one from Kyiv the other night, obviously right there in Zelensky's front yard. I mean, you don't have to see too many more of these to realize. And of course, this is not just a fire. It's not just a hit. This was on an important military facility. So this hurts a lot more. And I'm going to show you in just a second why this one hurts more than just the imagery that's going on here. But that imagery alone is quite compelling when you realize that with or without any more interceptors from the United States, you're not going to be able to stop this stuff. There's enough aerial attacks coming in from the Russian side that it's going to get through no matter what. Maybe it's slightly lower density, but it's still going to get through, and you're still going to get this stuff because Russia can just fire. If you have 5 interceptor missiles for a given target, they'll fire 10 drones. And if you have 10 interceptor missiles, they'll fire 20 drones. I mean, they're going to get through to their intended targets because they have the resources, because they have the ability and the missiles themselves and the production capacity to keep cranking them out. That's the situation here. Now that's at the strategic level here. And interesting, you talked about the delusionary issue of Zelensky. The day before this phone call, he still is showing he has no interest and no thought process whatsoever in ending the war. In fact, he's trying to ramp up business as though he thinks that there's something to do on the other side of a victory.
Я дякую всім компаніям і підприємцям, які підтримують український захист, які підтримують українську стійкість. Ми сьогодні говорили про те, що важливо, коли компанії виходять з російського ринку і працюють саме тут, в Україні. Ми також будуємо нову мережу співпраці з Америкою та багатьма іншими країнами на основі спільних можливостей у розвитку промисловості, технологічних секторів.
So you can certainly see there. I mean, that's something that you would do if you were the victor. That's something that you would do after you were fighting a war and maybe it had come to end on a negotiated settlement. Maybe you'd won something like that, where basically, okay, the war is over here, and now that we're going to start rebuilding our country, we're going to rebuild our economy. So I need to bring in, people that can help us do it. And I think we showed you that a picture the other day, a couple of days ago, about all the different companies that were in this big circle that Gary's showing you right here. And it wasn't just defense contractors. It wasn't just folks who were going to build missiles and bombs and that kind of thing, but also McDonald's, MasterCard, just several other regular companies. And that is just bizarre. Yeah, that's the one right there. So, you've got McDonald's, MasterCard, Boeing, of course, GM Holding, IBM, just any number of things here. Cisco Systems. Listen, you can do that kind of thing if you have an end of a war. But when you're on the losing end of it and it's continuing to go against you, this is bizarre. Now, it's bizarre too for these companies to have gone. I'm not sure what their intent was, because they should be able to just, I don't know, read the room or a little bit, or read a map, I guess. That would help if they're looking at a map. I don't know. It's just bizarre that why so many people in the West are so detached from reality while the Russians are just myopically and locked in focused on winning a tactical and an operational and strategic military victory. Whether that conversation between Putin and Trump actually included an ultimatum for Ukraine that Trump passed along, only time will tell on that. But what we know from what Putin has said publicly and openly, he said we're going to have a negotiated end that we're satisfied with, or we will win a military victory on the battlefield. Plain as day. Nebenzia said it. Sergei Lavrov said it. All the key Russian folks are emphatic about saying it. If people are listening, and it almost appears that they don't, or else that we're still, as I think Commodore Jeremy has said several times, the West is operating on a narrative and the Russians are operating on reality. And maybe it's as simple as that. It's hard for me to cognitively understand how, despite one's preference and what we'd like to see happen, that we just keep detaching ourselves from reality and clinging to this fiction in light of an advancing Russian. And that's what I want to focus on in the remainder of this show here, is on the tactical level. Because it's one thing for all these bombs to be going in targets, because that you can blow up a lot of stuff, but if you don't have a man on the ground, you still don't own anything. The Ukraine side still owns that city that got hit there. But on the other hand, if there is an army advancing, if you are coming up, then at some point you're not going to be able to have your own preference anymore. You're not going to be able to maintain any fiction. And we're starting to get into that situation right now. Now, I want to show you a bit of an extended clip here from our good friend Alex at History Legends, who we've had on the show a few times, and hopefully we can get back again very soon. He's putting out some magnificent stuff here of late. But he has another, and by the way, go to his show. I think it was just released yesterday on the tactical situation here. It's an excellent show that's, I think, 35, 40 minutes, something like that. Definitely worth your time. But I'm going to show you one piece here on a specific area, because in my view, this is the most important area on the entire tactical battlefield. More important than Sumy, more important than Kharkiv, more important than Zaporizhia. And that is Pokrovsk. If Pokrovsk falls, then I think that the whole defense could become unhinged. I think this is right now the fight for the entire war, because if you win this one, I think everything else can get rolled up, and you're going to see why in this small clip.
Because on the 27th of June, Ukraine's commander-in-chief, Alexander Syrsky, reported that Russia is concentrating its largest group of personnel in that direction, a force numbering 110,000 troops. That's 50% more than the entire British ground forces. Let that sink in for a second. Oh yeah, remember what I said in one of my last videos about Pokrovsk. But there's a second option for the Russian army. That is to jump on a defensive mode around Pokrovsk, while they shift their focus on the eastern side of the city. From there, they could push an open field towards the large urban area of Novo-Ekonomichne, from where they could start a grinding battle, house by house, towards Pokrovsk. This is exactly what is happening right now. Just kidding, it's actually worse. At the moment, the situation is critical because between 20 and 30,000 Ukrainian soldiers are facing encirclement. Starting in May, the Russian armed forces opened a breach along the TO-504 highway and now hold a 35-kilometer salient east of Pokrovsk. We can talk of an operational masterpiece, and you'll understand why in a minute. The Russians are wielding a big bulge that they could swing in any direction. As we speak, Russian storm detachments are currently carrying a wide flanking maneuver westwards. I'll make another video with more details about this operation. But what you have to understand right now is how the Russians are not getting bogged down in street-by-street battles. Instead, they're simply bypassing these urban areas. And by doing so, they also bypass most of Ukraine's strongholds. The operational objective of this orc doctrine seems to be Rodinsky. That was a situation in that sector on June 1st, plus 9 kilometers in a month. It's absolutely insane. The first step will be to take control of the Kazeni-Tariets River, as well as the villages of Raziny, Novotarietsky, Mayak, and maybe even Novo-Ekonomichne. Then comes this set of industrial areas and mines that can act as tactical bulwarks for Ukraine. At last, if the Russians thrust even deeper all the way to the Golden Point, they'll reach the TO-515 road and the settlement of Radinsky.
Yeah, and I'm going to show you on a map why that's critical in just a minute. But first of all, actually, let me show you on a map that area and why this is all important, how it's all tied together. You have the in the northern here, that video that Gareth showed you at the outset here from the strike last night. That's right here in Kyiv, in this area here. There's Kharkiv right here, and this is the location of where that struck. And it was in an industrial section here, which had been used as a logistics hub for the defense for the Ukraine side of the Kharkiv area. That's been here for well over a year and a half up here. And then this new one that's been coming in here where the Russians are now starting a new penetration into the Kharkiv Oblast. And now then they've hit this area back here, and they've been doing the same thing in other places. This is just the most dramatic images that we've had that we're able to show. But you see that Russia up in the northern part of the Eastern Front is now starting to make more and more inroads here. And you see these penetrations are starting to go deeper into the Ukraine side here. Now, on top of this, there's been additional operations here, especially in the Volchansk area. And you see these two, they're starting to expand this bridgehead a little bit. At the same time, they're expanding these two white areas here are just from last night, which I think we told you in our last tactical update. So they're continuing to expand that. So you see Russia's putting pressure all across the front line in these areas, all here. And that if Russia continues to push forward in here, another uncertainty for the Ukraine side. Will they push in here and then expand along these penetrations here to cut off this whole arc right here on the northeastern part? Or will they push forward in the Volchansk area in here and to move toward these this city here, which is kind of along the reservoir, which could then also isolate the entire area? So we don't know, but Russia is successfully moving up, and the Ukraine side is not able to stop them. Now let's run down to the Prosk area and why it's so vital. Because Russia is doing this kind of action up here, and because even in the Sumy area, where the Russians have come down after they retook the Kursk area, so that's continuing. That you see that they're continuing to have fights here, even though Russia's not making a lot of progress in this particular area. But the fight's going on. The fight's going on here in the Kharkiv area. Now a new one, and then in the Kupiansk area, also up here. That means that Ukraine can't move reserves from down here up into there. And now we get into the issue of Prosk. And now you may recall that toward the end of last year, from, I don't know, September, October of 2024 through the end of the year, there was a big push where the Russians had pushed on. They took Selidova and then all these other towns, Shevchenko, they moved up, and it looked like they were going to move straight onto Prosk. And at that time, the Ukraine side did move a lot of reinforcements down, and they beefed up their defenses here and brought this, at least the frontal assault, to pretty much halt. And then Russians said, okay, let's maybe go around the flank. So they started moving in this direction. Again, Ukraine moved in some reinforcements. They built some more defensive fortifications. And now then there's positional warfare going on here, but not a lot. Well, it appears then that Russia has put for priority on going in from the flank up here. And you just saw Alex talk about Rodinsky and why that's so important. So here's the fortress city of Prosk. And then you also heard him talk about how Russia is learning tactically, and why I say that they are prioritizing tactical advancements and to defend and limit their casualties. So they're not going into a lot of these urban areas and built-up areas and taking it block by block and house by house, as they have in some of the other areas and they have done in the past. Now they're bypassing a lot of those and just isolating them and moving forward. So now then that causes obviously a lot less casualties for the attackers, because now that in some of these urban areas, if you bypass them and you don't spend the troops, you have to rest out the defenders house by house, room by room, you just move past it and cut off the resupply. Now then you put the defenders in a position where they either run out of ammunition and weapons and money, food and even water. And then they have to either withdraw or they are surrounded and they have to surrender. So that's what Russia is prioritizing right now. And you see then how close, even since Alex made that film, now then here in this, they've actually moved into this village right here. And you see this penetration moving straight toward Rodinsky. He mentioned the road there that would have, and why that was. Let me show you why that's so important. If Russia is able to move the remaining distance right here and take Rodinsky, then they're going to have this main route that's going to be cut off here for resupply. That's going to then leave only this one over here to reinforce the whole city of Pokrovsk. If once Russia has this, then you can see this whole area is in a cauldron here. And according to what the information that Alex has found, that's somewhere around 20,000 Ukrainian soldiers are in there. And I would imagine that Russia, once they get to and take Rodinsky and cut off this road here, then they would probably turn back again to the pressure here to move and to try to cut off this one. Once these two roads are cut off, there is virtually no way that the Ukrainian side can keep its 20,000 troops fed and ammunition and all the things that they would need just to continue providing defense. And they would basically choke it off. If this gets taken here, folks, this could literally roll up the entire defense for the Ukraine side. Just imagine if this whole thing is taken here. Remember, we talked to you about an operation in the Zaporizhia area here where Russia is also putting pressure on in this particular area here, moving up to try to cut off the rail bridge or the rail lines from Zaporizhia also to Pokrovsk. But if this one gets cut off here, now then Russia can move its other troops either to this area in the south or back up into the Kharkiv area in the north, and you see things keep getting rolled up. But if they actually have a breakthrough here, and we've shown you some comments here from just earlier in this week that Russia has apparently large numbers of reserves that have not yet been employed, and some of them are in the northern part of the country, up in the Belarus area. Some are in the other parts of their occupied zones here. Some are actually in the Russian areas. But if they get a breakthrough, they can very rapidly move folks by rail and road networks into this area, and then they can exploit those pretty rapidly. Russia has big reserves. Ukraine doesn't. So once, especially if you lose a 20,000 person accommodation, you can see that it's not much longer. So it could well be, this is again goes back to what President Trump is reported to have said to Zelensky on his phone call, that, listen, the end is coming in now inside. You give missiles or no missiles. All I can do is slow down the air attacks. That's the best that we can get done. If we don't do anything and we just keep on with the fiction, you see that the Russian onslaught is continuing. This is the continuation of their summer offensive. They have the resources, they have the ammunition, they have the weapons, they have the weapon systems, they have the personnel, they have the air capability, they have the air defense. There has been also overnight some attacks on the Russian side of the line, where Ukraine is also doing its best to interdict onto the Russian ability to enforce, especially in the Kharkiv area, where they're trying to, where they're having that offensive. The Ukraine side is trying with their drones and missiles to also interdict, and some of those are getting through. There was an attack in Saratov and Ingles Air Base overnight, which had struck some targets, but there are too few of them. They don't have the ability to launch a wave of 500 in 2 out of 3 nights, and then in another large one, and to maintain that. The Ukraine side can't do it. And you see that if anyone wants to get hope from that Ukraine is doing that, well, you have to look at what's happening on the Ukraine side when Russia does have overwhelming capabilities in the air. It's diminishing Ukraine's ability, but it's not knocking them out of the war. And if you see that on the vastly larger Russian landmass, and you see that you have a tiny fraction of the number of missiles and drones that can get through and cause damage, you can understand why that's not going to knock Russia out of anything. And that's been going on for 3 years, and especially here in the last, say, 9 months or 6 months or so, Ukraine has really stepped up its attempt to attack into Russia, and they've had some success. But you see, it has no impact on the front, because Russia has calculated that into their operation. And that's how wars work. You get hit, and you just have to work around it. But Russia has so many more assets, and that's why we keep getting back to you time after time. This is a war of attrition. And the expectation is, in a war of attrition, I'm going to get hit. I'm going to lose some troops. I'm going to lose some assets and some facilities on my side. But it's the side that has the most capability to do it to the other side that's going to end up winning the war. And right now, there is no question that Russia is on the ascendancy, meaning they're still improving. The balance is continuing to move out of whack against the Ukraine side and for the Russian side. And it could be, and I certainly hope that it is, that President Trump is finally coming to acknowledge this, and he's setting the stage to say, hey, this is Biden's war, it's not mine, so I'm going to get out of it. So he's going to try and deflect any blame for it by putting it on the previous administration. He's trying to make this deal with Zelensky. And again, we could know within 10 days whether that's true or not, because if he signs an extension of the moratorium of the martial law, then either that wasn't the case with what was reported, or that Zelensky is just not going to be willing to do anything. And then it'll be interesting if they do extend it. Then what will we see Trump do? Because he may go back to what he was starting to do in April and just walk away. Don't know whether he will or not, but those are some of the things that we're going to be watching for. And those are some indicators as to where this may be going. But hear me clearly, if the Western/Ukraine side continues to ignore reality and continue to pretend like it's business as usual and we can actually have business and making plans for all this kind of stuff without addressing the elephant in the room, or the bear in this case, that's continuing to advance up here. And you see that even the linchpin of all this defense, the Pokrovsk area, is increasing damage. And Gary, I had sent you a full screen. I don't remember if we talked about it. If you have that on there, it shows the amount of territory being lost by the month. Do we have that one handy? I didn't talk about it and see if we have it loaded up. If not, we'll just continue to go on with it. Or even if I remember to send it. Sorry, I was kind of in a hurry getting ready for this show this morning. But you can just see graphically what's happening with how much territory is being lost just in 2025. And if I didn't send it, Gary, I think I might be able to pull that one in myself. Let me do that for us real quick, because it is kind of important to see. Because when you see this graphically put on there, it kind of throws things into a lot more relief, that you can say, oh yeah, I mean, this is not just claims. This is actually what's happening. And here this is right here. This is 2025 by the month. And you see that in January, they still were taking a fair amount. It had come down a little bit since November, the previous November, and then it reached a low in March, but only a low, didn't go away. And then it started picking back up in April. Then more than double that in May, then up to 556 square kilometers of territory taken by Russia. And then now here we are in July, where it's apparently on the same trajectory and may actually increase. And you can see just in that, especially in that short clip I showed you there from Alex from History Legend, he was showing you in just 30 days how much territory had been lost, 9 kilometers in that area. And that's the most important area here. So that shows you where Russia's putting its priority. So you can understand that's their priority of effort. That is what they consider to be the main effort of their operations in the special military operation right now. And Ukraine recognizes it, but so far they haven't been able to stop it. They can slow it down, but they can't stop it. And that also reinforces something we showed you on July 1st from Julian Ripka, where he admitted that, listen, the big problem is the weak spot that he said the Russians seem to have discovered is that the Ukraine side just doesn't have enough density of men. They have like 12 men over a kilometer or something like that. I can't remember the exact terminology, but he said that there's just too few of them. There's too few in a village, so Russia can just take them one after another. And now you see it graphically playing out on the battlefield. This is the truth, folks. I know a lot of people who are, all for Ukraine and are big defenders of what they is and don't like Russia. I can understand why people would think all those things and why you may have that viewpoint. But there does come a point to where you have to acknowledge reality, even if it's something that you detest, even if it's something you loathe, that you gnash your teeth, to continue to go towards your preferred outcome, to continue having a policy based on a narrative, means that the people that you say that you care about and that you want to succeed will continue to die unnecessarily. They will continue to die in large numbers. They will continue to lose ground. Everything that the defenders of Ukraine say they want to accomplish, they are perversely enabling them to lose. Because if they took the ugly deal that's been on the table for a while now, the killing can stop. President Trump is right. The killing can stop. The loss of territory can stop. It's going to come at a high price, especially politically. No question about it. That's just a fact. But to resist that, to refuse to do that and say, no, that's surrendering. That's rewarding aggression. I hear this all the time. They've been saying it really from the beginning. Anytime somebody talks about a negotiated settlement, you'll be rewarding aggression. And then they'll just keep coming. That's a theoretical situation. I'm talking about what is real. And the cost to people following that path and saying, no, we can't do this because it'll reward aggression, then what you are doing is that you are imposing a cost, an irrecoverable cost on the very people that you say you want to defend. because by going toward this unobtainable objective of not rewarding aggression, so-called, then you reward the aggressor by saying you can keep going because we won't stop of our own accord, and you'll keep killing everybody in your path. You'll keep destroying all these cities in the path, and they'll take more and more territory. And then it won't be 4 oblasts, folks. It won't be the 4 regions that are apparently still on the table. It will be 6, 8, maybe 10, maybe all the way to the Dnieper River. And if even that doesn't cause the Ukraine side to give, then they may then also put siege to Kyiv. And this time for real. The first time they did it in February 2022, it was just a show of force, really. And they just hoped that the presence of tanks and all this kind of stuff would scare the Ukraine side into surrendering. I think that was their intention. That was their plan A. They weren't resourced for plan B. We'll talk about that another day, have in the past. But if they come back this time, folks, there will be a plan B. And it will be resourced ahead of time. And you see them building up right now. Julian Rivka also talked that somewhere between 12 and 15 divisions of Russian combat power are being built through the remainder of planned on the remainder of 2025. That could be a big indicator that Russia is also planning on this. Russia may be physically planning and resourcing an operation that says, we don't think that Zelensky's going to do the right thing, or he's going to do the logical thing, maybe a better way to put it, and that they're resourcing and preparing, and that includes ammunition of all the different categories, drones, artillery shells, air defense missiles, air offense missiles, etc., glide bombs, the whole thing, for a big showdown in the first part of 2026, sorry. They may be doing that. And if you see those resources and those are real, then that increases even more the rational logic to say, let's bring this to an end. Let's shut this down now before it gets too further and you lose the whole country, because that's entirely possible. Let's hope it doesn't get to that. Let's hope that what President Trump is doing is bringing an end to this right now, ushering in an ugly defeat for the Ukraine side, but ends the killing and stops the forward progress of the Russian military. That's probably the only thing that can stop the Russians at this point. We'll see what happens. We may not have to wait very long. Like I said, maybe about 10 days or so. But in the meantime, we're going to keep you updated every day as we hear anything new, if we see any new information. But we're giving you the truth, folks. If it's the truth you don't like, but it is the truth, because we're unintimidated and uncompromised, and we'll continue to bring this to you as it happens. Be sure and stick with us, though. Like always, we bring you any breaking news that happens over the rest of the weekend or so. We got a great week for you lined up next week. We're going to have Doug McGregor, Jacques Beau, who I hadn't had on for a while, and I'm really eager to get him back on. Patrick Henningsen, Commodore Steve Jeremy, Larry Johnson, and a few others we're trying to nail down too. But in any case, it's going to be a great week. Look forward to seeing you then on the Daniel Davis Deep Dive.